Hello, it's Denise from Women Beyond a Certain Age. In a very rare and exciting podcast, we have a man. It's true. We have a live man. This man is extraordinary, and I'm so grateful out of his busy schedule that he would come on today. And it's Michael Twitty, author of The Cooking Gene. Now, if you don't know that book, thank God you're listening to this podcast, because I think you must have been living under a rock in the last few years. So, hello, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, so nice to be here.
You have a lovely voice. It's a lovely voice.
I was told in a nasty review from when I read The Cooking Gene for audio file, they were like, well, he's obviously not a gifted reader. Like, okay.
I'm going to tell you something. I always say about myself, it's a crapshoot. You either really like me or you don't. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I decided a long time ago that I'm here for me.
Come on.
That's what my purpose is, for me to be here and do what I can in the world. And what other people think of me is their problem.
That's right. That's their issue.
That is their issue. Well, okay, let me say a little background about you, and then I want you to talk.
Sure.
Michael has a beautiful new book out called Koshersoul, and he's going to tell us something about it. I wanted to talk more about Koshersoul, but I went back to The Cooking Gene because I've had The Cooking Gene for several years on my bookshelf. I read it when it first came out, and everybody that knows me knows that I have ADHD. So I got into The Cooking Gene yesterday, Michael, and I couldn't get out. Okay, I went down the rabbit hole. It's really, I don't throw this word around at all. It's a masterpiece. Okay, so I want you to talk about how the journey, which is fabulous. Cindy, before we got on, Cindy said, oh yeah, I stalk him from his blog and his website and stuff. And I thought, good for you, Cindy. If you don't know Michael, I want to say this, and then you tell us, Michael, this came from your blog, Afro Culinaria. Your blog went to book. Is that correct? Is that fair to say?
It's only because I shepherded the project from, concept to blog to book.
Good.
There was so much resistance.
I'm sure. Tell us why.
Well, okay, so this is the way I usually put it.
Okay.
The Black, I hate the word contribution, but Black engagement with American food, especially when it comes to the era of our ancestors, has pretty much been streamlined to black eyed peas, okra, watermelon, and rice. Ain't those Black folks so nice? They did a few things, a few little interesting regional trivial things. But did they really do anything of real value? I would dare to say there's no High on the Hog, there's no other projects out there until people like me who were not in restaurants, who were not institutionalized,
yes, yeah,
had the opportunity to say, no, we need to tell this story as well, and that African Americans are not a racial group, we're an ethnic group, and ethnic groups have their own history. The other day ago, here's a great example of this, and I'll try to be succinct. I had an interview with someone who said to me, Koshersoul, great and all, but you don't really tell us where your family is from. And I'm like, well, I'd spent the entire Cooking Gene telling you where my family was from. And it took years upon years upon years of work and research and thinking and reading and researching. I said to the person, this isn't someone had a dream or they were running away from something and ended up at Ellis Island and they were in a tenement for a couple years. And then the next generation got to another neighborhood that was less crowded, and then their grandchildren got to a suburb, and that's my American story. So asking me, where did they come to? Oh, well, the history of Black people in this country is a history of forced migration.
Yes.
And then they were like, where'd they come from? And I'm like, where they come from was many, many different places that are now independent nations with different ethnic groups, some of which exist and which in the same forms, which don't. But like asking me for a simplistic sort of like linear answer for a non-linear history isn't how this is going to start. If you don't know that it's a nonlinear history with a lot of complicated issues, and there are very few good cowboys in this story, then what you do is it tells me that you don't know how to handle our history.
That's right.
That you don't know how to handle policy, that you don't know how to handle the issues of the day, because if you think that it's as simple as, okay, a handful of Black people got picked up in Africa, then they landed in Georgia, and then they stayed in Georgia, and then blah, 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 then you're, okay. So the largest forced migration in American history was the domestic slave trade. And then the largest forced migration in human history was the transatlantic slave trade. And then more people of African descent crossed the ocean in boats before 1820 than anybody else. Like, there's layers to this. And then, of course, the largest free migration was the Great Migration of Black folks to the North, and the Midwest and the West Coast. Asking me to simplify my history or point to the history is that's the problem. People don't know. So I wanted people to know and understand the African American experience as ethnic and culinary. And I also wanted them to understand that our ancestors were real people, and unfortunately, history has denied us some of the most important elements of their lives. Sometimes their names, sometimes where they were buried, sometimes where they were born, where their people were from. I mean, their ancestors did care about their roots and their heritage, but when you're sold at least 3 times in your life, how do you keep hold of those things? So having done that work, I also forgot to tell you, we did the Southern Discomfort Tour.
I wanted to ask you about that. Please tell me about it.
Yes, and so I had an idea that I would go do the research around the South, and that I would cook in these sites of memory, foodscapes as I called them. And I really wanted to tell a story. So I was like, let's do this. We had no money. My then partner and I. So he suggested crowdfunding. I never heard of crowdfunding. And everybody crowdfunds. But back then it was brand new.
Right.
So we chose one that would let us have some money if we didn't raise all the money. Well, the last day of the campaign, some angel gave us the last $1,500.
Oh, how wonderful.
That we needed. And I was really pensive and nervous, trying to figure out how we would squeeze more out of what little we had. Well, then we got that $1,500. The first good amount of money came from my lovely friend. Here's a shout out, Nancy McDermott, who is yes, cookbook author. You know Nancy and
Nancy
writer.
and I are twins, separated at birth, Michael.
Bon vivant, right? Correct.
I'll tell you, I wish I had those blue sparkling eyes, but no, Nancy McDermott is very special.
She's amazing. Without her, this project wouldn't even exist, because she told a whole community of people who may not have heard my voice or known about me, this is important. Pay attention to this, contribute. And she made a lovely contribution that really got us steamrolling and kept me sane she had us over her home many times, had me talking to different groups of people. I did not know this at the time, but thinking back on it, Nancy was teaching me how to campaign for this. She was teaching me how to schmooze, how to rub elbows, how to encourage, engagement, and kept me calm when I thought, things weren't going right.
Well, honey, she's a natural charmer.
Yes.
She's a natural charmer. I always say that to her. And thank God, Michael, how wonderful. And this story is new to me. I knew that Nancy had talked to me about you. okay, when your book first came out. She said to me, Denise, this is really an important book. I did not know this other part of your story with Nancy. And I'm not surprised. I'm just thrilled and amazed as always that she, you know what I mean? It's kind of what you hope for in life, isn't it?
Yeah, because you know what? You need to know that there are people who have your back. And of course, here's another part of the story. My mom was fading
Mm.
when this book came to fruition. In 2014, my mother passed away.
Okay.
Way too young,
Yeah.
67.
Oh, you're way too young.
And it hurt. And it hurt the way no other passing in my life has hurt. And someone told me, I believe it was Wayne Randolph from Colonial Williamsburg. He said to me, this is different from anything else you've experienced because you were with your mother the longest and your mother was with you the longest. So no one knows you like this woman who had you as a part of her system. And my mother and I had a lot of issues, but as push came to shove, she really started to tell me things like, I've changed. I'm not as brusque as I used to be. I'm not as quick fire to be angry at things. And one day I was really frustrated. And my mom said to me, don't worry, what you need is coming to you. I've prayed for you and I'm going to keep praying for you. Well, the Yoruba, one of our ancestral groups in West Africa, Nigeria, they say, I have a beautiful proverb that says, once your mother has prayed for you, you are unstoppable. So I feel very privileged to, in all of this, I mean, I can name 1,000 names. Marcy Cohen Ferris is another one. My mother, my cousins, a lot of people. But the bottom line is that without these, as I say in Yoruba, yeah, me, my mother's, yeah is mother, me is me, mine. I couldn't do this.
Gotcha.
I couldn't do this. And so they're part of my spiritual world. So when I went to Sierra Leone, one of the most important masquerades is called the Sandi or Bondo. And she represents the spirit of all the mothers and the women of the people.
Oh.
And when she comes, she's very intimidating, but when she comes up to you, she's always danced, by the way, by a woman. Men do not dance Sandi and Bondo. They're only danced by women because it's only passed down through the women's, secret society.
Okay.
And so when the Bondo mask made her presence known when we were in Sierra Leone in early 2020, she comes up to me and I started to cry.
Yeah, I bet.
Because the movements that she makes as part of her entrance, especially to certain people, is one of a mother who's found her lost baby and wants to comfort it. So as an African American whose mother came from the Mende, and she's comforting me saying, welcome home. So yeah, part of my mother's effects are buried in Sierra Leone.
Oh, how lovely, Michael.
And I have to go back to do some things. I also got my passport and citizenship. Yeah, lots of things. And then, when we went to Senegal, I actually took a little small amount of my mom's remains because she was cremated.
Yeah.
And I had my own special ceremony at Gorée Island at the door of no return. And so I returned part of my mother's essence to the ancestors.
How perfect. When you say, Michael, I have to just thank you. When you talk about it, that there was resistance. And I know this from my experience. I started being a culinary producer and food stylist in the 90s, Michael.
Wow.
Okay, 1990s. I know I look so good. Who could believe I'm this old? But so in 1993, 94, when High on the Hog came out, I was also a producer at the Discovery Channel and the Learning Channel. And I had met Jessica, Dr. Harris, once at an IACP event. So I went right to the Discovery Channel. I said, this book is a show for you. Okay, this is exactly what you need. They looked at me and said, oh, no, we're not, no, not a big enough audience. Always, it's not a big enough audience.
Right.
So in 2021, High on the Hog is one of the best, watch shows. So Michael, I'm just saying this, everything takes longer than we think it's going to. That's my feeling about careers, about culture. Do you know what I mean? And when you mention words like frustrated or disappointed, absolutely. That doesn't make it any easier for your journey. I met Verda May Grosvenor in about 2000. She'd written a darling cookbook about the low country cooking in South Carolina. And when I met her, Michael, I mean, she was, again, a PBS. She'd been from PBS. So I had known of her because of my association with PBS, and Natalie Dupree, and she was a friend of Natalie's. And here I met this woman. Now, talk about ignorance, and when people just don't know, okay, they haven't been exposed. Michael, I grew up in California my entire life.
Right.
I've been to Louisiana, to New Orleans on vacation. I've been to Atlanta to teach. I've barely been to the Carolinas. So I didn't know when I first saw her cookbook, and she was gracious enough to give me one, and I was on tour with her for a couple of days. And I don't know if you know Verda May, she was tall and beautiful. She was an actress also. I mean, she was a commentator. She could do anything, okay? Right. She was one of those, she could do anything. And I felt so embarrassed when she gave me the book, and I spent a couple of days with her, and then I admitted to her, I said, I need to share something with you. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't know about the Gula Islands. I didn't know about this cuisine hiding. I knew none of this. And she said to me, that's okay, honey. We all learn when we're supposed to. And she was so sweet to me. But that, to me, Michael, again, going way back, I just think, and then your book coming out, and still resistance, horrendous, but this is because we know of erasure in our country. And I always say this, and now it makes me angry, and Cindy's so many times she's going to say, she puts her hand up to say, not another rant. I look back, Michael, at what I learned about American history, and it's a bag of shit. Okay. I know so little of the truth about American history. I was embarrassed a couple of years ago when I was probably Nancy McDermott. I said, how come I never knew about Juneteenth? And I probably really learned about it from Tony Tipton Martin. Right. How could I have gone all these years and never heard of that? I went to high school, colleges. I mean, Black history was just starting to be taught in colleges when I was in college. And I'm sorry I missed that opportunity. But I'm just saying, sometimes people are ignorant because they want to be. Sometimes they're ignorant because they haven't been exposed. Do you know what I mean? But it's an amazing thing to me. So your journey is so much more important than just now.
Yep.
This is lifelong work. This is your legacy. So for that, I mean, I can't say enough nice things about you. And culinary injustices. I always love it, Michael, again, because I was at PBS. So when you walk through the hallways of a PBS station, there's all the pictures of people that have been on TV for years. And I worked in the San Francisco KQED, and Jacques Pepin and Julia Child shot there a lot. I worked a few days on both of their shows. I was working on a culinary, another show at that time. But Lena, you know who I'm talking about, Chef Lena from New Orleans. She had a TV show. Oh, I can't think of her last name.
Lena Richard.
Oh, thank you. I have her cookbook. Her picture was there. She was in 1948 on PBS.
That's right. That's
right.
Didn't
get there for years. So here was a Black woman who'd been a caterer and a chef and a lifestyle. I mean, she was everything. Okay. And no one ever mentions her until just recently. I've seen her name in print again. And I thought, well, and everybody says Julia Child, the first PBS chef on TV. I think, no, Julia was not the first. Matter of fact, it would be 20 years before anybody would know Julia's name. So the frustration level is there. There's no doubt about it. Just so tell us more. I know about your Southern Discomfort Tour a little, Michael, because I used to, when you were on Facebook more, and I certainly understand not everyone, I liked you on Facebook because I got to see what you were doing. So that's all. As Cindy said the same thing. What I love about Facebook, Michael, is I love seeing what people are doing with their careers. Okay.
Right.
I don't want to know about that you stubbed your toe or that your dog, got sick. I want to know what you're doing. And Facebook is a way to broadcast it. I used to love to watch the cooking stories you were doing, your presentations. And is that part of the Southern Discomfort Tour when you were, and your segment at the end on High on the Hog, where you were talking about the food and showing how they cooked it? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, well, Facebook was interesting because the more my profile grew, the more I had smart Alex.
Oh, yeah.
In my life. And it was getting to be really uncomfortable because it was family, it was friends, it was everybody who were just like, oh, you have a growing profile. Let me wag my finger at you.
Oh, I see. Okay. I understand.
And tell, I'm going to correct you. I'm going to be the one that corrects you in public.
Oh.
And it went from being small and very petty to being very obnoxious and abusive. And so I began to not post.
Well, I understand that. So trolls, what you're talking about is trolls.
Yeah, but the problem is the trolls were my people.
Oh.
The trolls were friends and family and acquaintances. It wasn't just someone who was looking to pick a fight with someone they didn't know. And it was also people who were friends of friends of friends on Facebook.
I see.
One of Natalie Dupree's friends of a friend said, well, Michael Twitty's not going to go anywhere until he stops, being so angry.
Oh.
Okay, boo. I see you. I got you. That's nice. So that's what, I had to kind of pull back from that. And also this, I loved the validation of people who understood the cooking world and food world and wanted to engage that way. What I didn't love was the fact there were people who just were being intrusive, people who actually had a lot of respect for. One person who did this, who shall remain nameless, is actually a chapter in Koshersoul because his wife was it was so weird because I knew them during their courtship. I knew him a long time, and his wife and I were very cordial. Like, oh, hi, how you doing? Da, da, da. Until like after Facebook, and I'm in their house and she has a newborn baby and it's all kind of issues go down. But like I talked about like what that was like because I found myself becoming very different in the eyes of the people who I thought knew me. And so I had to answer for everything. And frequently what people would come down to is they would say, you have too big of a profile platform to say things that stupid or da 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 whatever. Like, wow, you just weren't allowed to be you. And so I had to cut it off. I felt this is not worth my time.
You know what, Michael? I think you're a lovely man who's sensitive and smart. And see, for me, and I'm just speaking for myself, I have people tell me all the time that I'm angry. Okay. God, you're angry, Denise. I go, I am. And I usually then tell them to fuck off and I block them. So
Amen.
That's it. Do you know what I mean? But I've been told I was angry almost my entire life, even as a child, and raised by a woman who sent me to charm school. It was not effective. I mean, ballet lessons, she tried. Oh, Michael, she tried. But the bottom line was, we are who we are. Now, I'm angry. It's so many things, and my husband, I always say to him, oh, I'm so tired of that white man's boot on my neck. And he just says, Denise, please don't say things like that out loud. I go, why? Are you kidding me? Look what's happening in the Supreme Court. You don't think that all of us aren't going to suffer? I mean, you don't think that Oh, anyway, you get my drift. But I'm angry, Michael, and I think that I try to use my anger to tell the truth. So I'm sorry if people are resistant sometimes to what things you say, but maybe you're just telling the truth and people don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that at the end of the day, I know that I'm doing what's necessary, what's right. Because the bottom line was, I remember being at the Roger Smith Cookbook Conference.
Okay.
And someone who I know who wasn't being mean or cruel, but being very well-meaning, was just like, well, these people don't know you and they know how to handle your identity. And all I could think was, I have to change this because there are lots of people who are just different, who need a chance to speak.
Absolutely.
Need a chance to be heard, who
Absolutely.
need a chance to be, to have their opinions and intelligence captured. And so I said, you got to do this not for you, but for the other people.
That's right.
This is not about you. This is about the other people. And however far you go is however far you'll go. But if you can say with a true smile and be happy for someone else who's been able to push things forward a little bit more, then this is what part of what your job is.
That's right.
So that's why the Cooking Gene is about my African American heritage and backstory and my ancestors, and how, tracing my food and family routes and roots from Africa to America, from slavery to freedom. And Kosher Soul is about my Jewish journey. And then the last book in this trilogy is about, queer presence in the kitchen.
Okay, now have you started writing that already? I was hoping, somewhere I read, Michael, that there was a trilogy, and I was going to ask you about that. Fabulous. So tell us a little bit now. I just want to say this one thing. When the Cooking Gene came out, and I know you won a James Beard Award. If not, did you win 2 James Beard Awards?
2, yeah.
Yeah. If people don't know the book, okay, Michael, I just want to say to them, you would enjoy it. Go to your local bookstore or Amazon, buy the book. To me, Michael, it totally starts to fill in a whole lot of spaces of things I didn't know. And didn't it also, in the book, doesn't it say you were an 8th or 9th generation Twitty in this country?
I'm an 8th or 9th generation member of my family.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's not counting the indigenous part of our family.
Okay.
That's simply from West Africa to here to now.
Crazy. That's crazy. When you think of how long that is, Michael. That's someone like me. My grandfather came here from Italy as a grown man. Had my family's been in San Francisco for almost 100 years. Do you know what I mean? And that seems like a long time to us, but nothing 7th or 8th generation. Now answer me this. Please tell us about Kosher Soul.
Okay. So Kosher Soul, much like the Cooking Gene, is a braid of culinary history, personal memory, memoir, vulnerabilities, confessions. It's a blend of contemporary social commentary and recipes.
Got it.
More recipes in the Kosher Soul than the Cooking Gene.
Okay.
I didn't want a brand that said, here, buy the memoir, here, buy the cookbook, da 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 da, that kind of thing. I know that it's worked for some people in this trade. I didn't want to be overly, I didn't want to sell. I wanted to teach.
Honey, and I can see all your years of teaching, again, from blog to teaching book. It's a journey. Good for you. And honey, publishers want to know what it is. They want to be able to write on the back of the book, at the top top left-hand corner, cookbook or memoir. They get confused when you try to do more than one thing. So I commend you that you've been able to do it.
Well, it's because we need to have
diversity,
but also food memoir stories and food stories that aren't just how-tos that teach you for people's lives.
That's right. And also not just from restaurant chefs. I mean, there's a
Mhm.
lot of stories out there. One of the reasons I think Anthony Bourdain was so popular was that he shined the light on the whole kitchen crew and not just on himself. He
Mhm.
talked about other people in kitchens. Okay. And that's because kitchens are, what they are. I love kitchens, but there's so many stories. So, Michael, now, was this your idea, Kosher Soul? Was it always your idea to write this trilogy?
Yes.
Around? Okay. See, so you
I
have,
knew I knew that I wanted to write Kosher Soul, and I
okay.
knew that I wanted to write the Cooking Gene. I
Okay.
did not know what any other projects would form themselves into. I've also done rice with
I saw that.
University of North Carolina Press,
Yes.
which garnered a recognition from the New York Times as being one of the cookbooks to read in 2021. There was a toss up which one I would do first. The
Okay.
Cooking Gene kind of went out, and then came Kosher Soul. And now that it's done, it took me longer than I thought, but the past administration and the culture that it created really did impact how this book was being done.
Okay.
There were so many cultural flashpoints that it was really tough. And then, of course, the conversations kept swirling. What else can I say? I can also say that the Rona, the pandemic,
Oh my God. Yes.
certainly got in the way. But I was also glad that it did not show up in, just in time to be in a pandemic world.
I get it.
Because that would not have been good. But also during that same pandemic year was a summer of racial social justice reckoning.
Yep.
So there was that too. So I didn't really have, much of a choice. I mean, they were just like, come on, get it done, get it done, get it done, get it done. And you know how that is, hurry up and wait. And I'm glad it didn't get done, because if it had, I'm sure it would not have withstood the weight
Got it.
of that year of economic depression and social upheaval, and people not being, then they wouldn't know if the world's going to end. They don't know what the next book says. With Judaism, I must say that it's very complicated, because number one, some people might feel that one needs to convert despite having Jewish ancestry or a paternal ancestry, or
Okay.
that's one thing. Some people say you should even convert-ish, quote unquote, if even if you have a Jewish mother and you're
Yeah.
halakhically Jewish, but they weren't raised that way.
Yes.
So there's a lot. It's very complicated, but there are not so many like come to the light stories in Judaism as much as it is a story about meaning, family, purpose. Family in Judaism is not just the immediate family or the extended family; it's the entire family
Absolutely.
of the Jewish people.
Absolutely.
Which of course is the connecting theme, of course, with the Cooking Gene, right?
Right.
Family. Who are
Family.
you? Right. Who are your family? Familia. Who are your people? Where do you come from? How can you create family? What are you bringing to the table as a member of the human species? So those are really big questions that a lot of people never seem to want to figure out a way to answer.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think people don't even know where to start, Michael. I mean, you do. You're looking at these complicated things, and you obviously have the mind that says, "Oh, let's do some research and I'll find out." There are people that are just don't even. They've never thought of it. Okay.
Well, I mean, think about this. One of the things I'm very proud of about both books, but especially in the Cooking Gene, is I have a chapter on corn.
Yes.
And I talk about how the corn was the hominy, the corn which later became grits, and the corn starch from making the hominy was used to starch the petticoats
Oh.
of the women of the plantation, because when they had a dance, when they had something else, well, obviously this is how the young people socialize. And the idea that you know, at a corn shucking, if you found the radiator corn, you got to kiss or, you know, flirt with the person you wanted.
Oh.
And I thought to myself, this is the fine detail
Yes.
that cookbooks can't tell you. Of
Yes.
course, you had all these dishes from corn, right? It was the coating to the chicken. It was it was hush puppies. It was bread. It was hoe cake. It was hominy. It was grits. It was, you know, da 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 da, on and on and on and on. It was soup. It was a vegetable. It was this. It was that. And then you think about, oh, their mattresses were corn husks, and their dolls were corn husks, and the hominy water made her skirt pop when she walked to the dance. And of course, when she was dancing, it added to the drama of this moment of freedom that my ancestors enjoyed.
And the swirling of their skirts.
Yes, and all of this. And so there's this thing. You get this full portrait of people's lives, and all of a sudden they aren't as anonymous anymore.
Yeah.
We can't excuse their amnesia. And that's what happens when you braid culinary history with reflection, with memoir, with all of these things in conversation. I mean, a big element of my work is that it's about creating conversation, having conversations, and fomenting conversation.
Everybody's mind works differently. And sometimes, because I'm a very visual person, I can just see you connecting dots, like those games we used to do as kids. You remember how you connect the dots and you find out which shape you got? I can see you connecting dots. So when you talk, though, it's inspiring, Michael. It's inspiring. So I cannot thank you enough. Now, I want everyone to know, as always, all the information on Michael Twitty and how to reach him will be when we broadcast. Michael, we put it all up in the cute picture of you and the color copy of your cover of your book. And if anyone wants to reach Cindy and I, they can reach us at womenbeyond@icloud.com. We love messages from people. And all I can say is, Michael, I'm going to beg you to come back and talk to us again, because we have just touched the surface.
Yeah.
And I want you to come back and talk to us again about Kosher Soul or what you're doing next. Are you on Twitter?
Yes, Twitter at Kosher Soul.
So, okay, good. Twitter, Kosher Soul. Perfect. So people will know when you're speaking or if you're doing an appearance.
Right.
Excellent. Michael, thank you so much. I hope.
Thank you, Denise.
Oh, I cannot thank you enough. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Cindy. As always, Cindy handles everything, as people know. Cindy keeps the wheels on the wagon train, Michael. That's all I can tell you. If left in my own devices, I would not have a podcast. So thank you again. And everyone, thanks for listening. And write when you get work. Bye-bye.
Bye.